So I got Chris Kassin, I got City Davis. Now, y'all guys been here? This is the second time.
Yes.
And it's cool because first I was gonna get both of you guys separate, and I was like, hey, well, I met both of y'all. Only one person we're missing. I haven't done him is Bill Shoreham, and it's not because he never wanted to. I just haven't contacted him. I just been really busy. But I forget there's also another one. I've seen him before, but I just haven't talked to him. But I need to do that. But so before we get into it, what do each of y'all guys do?
Sure. Sydney Davis. I work full-time as a nurse anesthetist, providing anesthesia services to the hospital here in Vermillion. And I've got 3 young kids, so mother is very much part of my job title. Married to my husband, Garrett. We live on a farm north of Vermillion, about 10 miles. So agriculture is also very much a part of my way of life. So wear many hats, as many of us do, and enjoy all of it. And then finally, serving District 17 as a state senator is probably one of the other larger hats that I wear. So enjoy working with others in our community to, bring about positive change, and just appreciate you inviting me back.
Sweet. And what about you, Chris?
Yeah, I'm Chris Kassin. I'm actually a state representative from District 17, and like you mentioned, Bill Shoreham and I represent this district in the House of Representatives. I am the Vice President for External Affairs at the University of South Dakota Foundation. So fundraise on behalf of the university, try and get the resources necessary for the students, the faculty, in the institution to do really good things, to do positive things and really impact the community, the state, and in some respects, the nation. So enjoy that. I have 2 kids. Our daughter Collins is 10. Our son Kellen is 8. And I'm married to Katie Kassin, who did this podcast not too long ago. And I'm just trying to live up to her, to the level that she set. So hopefully with Senator Davis here, we can get somewhat close. So thank you, and appreciate being here.
Yeah, and then we were talking about a little bit that with Katie, so she's my number one. Like, she just skyrocketed. She became a very popular person. She's great at talking. And I remember right before that, I had you on, Chris, and because I looked at the numbers. And then when I had you, my views went like that. And then when I had you were like number one for a long time.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, I think you were number one until I had Larry Coral, who I don't think I had a month ago. So y'all guys kind of helped me out a little bit. So.
Well, that's why they call it the better half. that's
Now, so we're going to talk about Senate and then the House, state legislative stuff. But I also want to know, so when you guys ran, why did you guys pick, like, for example, I want to do House or I want to do Senate? Like, what made you guys want to pick either or?
Perfect. So kind of taking a couple steps back in my story, I initially ran for the State House of Representatives in 2020, was first elected to that. Each term is 2 years long. So I did a term in the House, and then when it was time to, when I was up for re-election, Senator Art Rush at the time was termed out. We have chamber limits in the South Dakota Legislature. And so the Senate seat for our area was open. And so I decided to then run for the Senate seat. So for me, it really wasn't necessarily, I have to be a senator, or I have to be a representative. It was just a matter of opportunity and timing. At the time when I ran for the House of Representatives in 2020, the current representatives were also termed out. They had met the term limits and needed to have a turnover there. So I had an opportunity and in both chambers, and so just decided to take it.
Then you, Chris?
Well, I kind of piggyback off that. So when then Representative Davis decided to run for the Senate, it opened up 2 open seats in the House. So Representative Davis would have decided to go to the Senate, and at the time, Representative Richard Basgard was also serving, and due to the redistricting, which happens every 10 years based upon census, he's in Turner County. it became a different district. So the District 17 now is basically all of Clay County and then Southern Union County, when it used to be Clay County and Turner County. So it basically, the redistricting changed, and so there was no incumbents in District 17. We already had a candidate for the Senate, so it just made more sense to run for the House.
Oh, okay. Now, do you guys enjoy it? Like being on there?
Yeah. No, that pause isn't just. I, like a lot of things, right? Anything that's worth doing isn't going to be easy. So there's obviously days that are challenging and days that are incredibly rewarding. And it is the really rewarding days that keep me keep my cup full and keep me coming back. And my desire to keep serving our friends and our neighbors here, because there is a real opportunity to make positive change. I've been doing this now, moving into my third consecutive term in the legislature, and there is the ability to make positive change, and I think my strongly rooted optimism keeps my eyes focused on that instead of some of the challenging parts that come along with it. But the good definitely outweighs any of the challenging days.
How are you liking it, Chris?
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's incredibly rewarding. I think I've enjoyed being a member of the South Dakota legislature and the relationships that I've made in the legislature. I'd also say that I think part of what's rewarding and part of what's enjoyable is kind of goes back to the way that things are in South Dakota. We are a citizen legislature. So we only meet as a legislature for 9 weeks, and the rest of the time we live amongst the people we serve. So it's rewarding because you not only you're enacting laws and you're helping things and you're pushing things along, but then you also get to see those things in action, versus where if you were a year-long legislature or a 7-month or however long legislator, you're away from where you actually serve almost too long to basically see the impact that you're making. So when when some of the positive things that happen, we actually get to see those things because we're here. We're here basically the majority of the year. And so I think living amongst the people that you serve is incredibly important. And I think it's really a special thing that we have here in South Dakota.
Okay. And if I'm correct, if I remember right, it's 2 terms each, right? One for or 2 terms for the House. Oh no, 2 years and then 2 years Senate, right?
Yes, everybody in South Dakota is on a 2-year term. Okay.
So that means, after Senate, you can't do anything else with that no more, right? Because you did 2 and 2.
Oh.
Or
we have it's technically chamber term limits. So that means you can do 4 consecutive terms, which would be 8 years total, in one chamber. So once I do, for me personally, I still have 2 more terms in the Senate before I am. Wait, am I doing that right? Yes, 2 more. 2 more terms in the Senate until I am term limited. So 8 years consecutively in one chamber. I don't want to say I'm cheating, but my record or my length of service is a little different because I started in the House of Representatives for 2 years and then moved over. So in a way, it seems like I've been there a little longer than, or it can be confusing, I should say, since I served in one.
Oh, okay. So like in total, it would be counting House and Senate, you could be 16 years if you wanted to.
If you wanted to, yes. And so then again, the chamber limit is really just for the chamber. If you, and this does happen occasionally where someone will be, if I do my 8 consecutive years in the Senate and I said, hey, I don't know that I'm ready to be done, or I feel like my district still needs my, I'm being encouraged to still be involved, I could run for the House. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't say that you can't, be in the legislature ever again. It just says you have to move from that seat. So you either have to take a break or you have to run for the opposite chamber. And so I do think like it provides for a nice balance of bringing in new voices, but also allowing for legislative experience to still be available. It's very rare that we have the number of legislators that have served more than 10 years or 8 years at one time is very low. And so and a lot of that leans to the fact that we are, a constituent legislature, but the few voices that are elected and in the legislature that have, lots of years of experience, I've come to appreciate them a lot. Sometimes that can get a bad rep, like, oh, you're just, up there and won't leave, and we need new ideas. But there's some really important, I've come to really value those that have the long lengths of experience in legislative service, because we're all a constituent legislature, right? Like, there's a lot of turnover, there's a lot of new people coming in and out, but sometimes that historical perspective of knowing what happened even 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, or beyond is incredibly valuable. Because there is one thing I will tell you that do not have term limits are lobbyists and executive branch, people that work for state departments. They can be there as long as they want. And I think some of the downside of a legislature that turns over a lot is then members are constantly trying to relearn all the time and are trying to learn the process and learn the history. And you have lobbyists that have been doing this 20 years, state department executives that have been doing this for 20 years. And guess what? They just know more than you do, and they know how to play the game better than you do. And so I just, not to beat up on some of them, because a lot of them are good people by all means, but that imbalance of institutional knowledge can be a little hindering. So
okay.
I know. Sorry, got a little into the weeds there.
Nah, it's all good. Does it ever get intense during those sessions? Well, no, actually, no, because that'll probably be an off-topic thing if we ever get into it. But because I want you guys here, because we're going to talk about some of the differences, Senate, House, because I think a lot of people, and I think a lot of people just don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. I don't know how it works. I'm barely learning it, because I thought it ran the same as the federal government, and now this is state, so this stuff is different. So how does it work? How does the House, how does the Senate, what do they do? Tell me all the details.
Well, so in the House we have 70 members. So there's 35 legislative districts. We're District 17. There's the 35 legislative districts. In each district, there's 2 representatives and 1 senator. So we have 70 members. They have 35 members. And so what that means is the committees are the same. We just have, in the committees that you work on, we just have more people. We have more people to vote on the floor. We have more people on our committees. But for appropriations, where we actually have the same number we have 9 legislators, 9 House members. They have 9 senators on the Joint Committee of Appropriations. It's the only one where there's the same number on the committees. So obviously there's differences of opinion and different things like that. But I think the process is very similar. So a bill is introduced, doesn't matter what it is introduced. It's assigned to a committee. So let's say it's a House bill. So a House member introduces a bill. It's introduced, and then it's assigned to a committee, and it'll be assigned to the appropriate committee, probably by whatever the subject matter is. Oh, so if it's a health bill, go Health and Human Services, whatever. So once it's assigned to that committee, it has to pass that committee. So it has to get a favorable number of votes in that committee in the House. Once it gets a favorable number of votes, then it is passed along to be heard by the full House of Representatives. Mm-hmm. And there are certain times when 2/3 of the vote is required, appropriations bills or emergency clause, but most of the time you just need a simple majority. So if that bill then that was passed out of the House committee then passes on the House floor with a majority, then that bill is sent to the Senate, where the same process starts over again. They will assign that bill to a committee. Doesn't necessarily have to be the same committee. I mean, depending what the subject matter is and what their leadership decides, depends on where that committee goes. And then the process starts again. Senate Senate committee. If it has a favorable outcome, then it goes to the Senate floor. And then ultimately, if in any of that whole exchange, there's a change, then that's voted on. So we have amendments, we have things like that. So the bill that comes out of let's say the House committee, for example, and gets put on the House floor, there might be an amendment put on that bill that changes that bill. Well, then we vote on that bill plus the amendment. And again, whatever we pass out of the full House is what is sent to the Senate. Now, if the Senate decides that here's the House's bill, the Senate gets the bill and they say, okay, we somewhat like this, but we want to change this, and they pass out a different version, well, we have to then figure out a way to have both houses either kill the bill or pass the same bill. So there's a process where you can have simple concurrence, whether it's just a minor change. But if it's kind of a substantive change, we have what's called a conference committee, where you'll have 3 members of the Senate, 3 members of the House get together and try and find compromise, try and find something, take that back to their respective chambers. And then again, that has to be passed out a majority of each house's, the same bill, before it's sent to the governor. So I don't know, that's kind of in a really rudimentary way, the life cycle of a bill. I don't know, Senator, to mess it up.
No, I think you did good. I don't know what more I would add other than just, I think the process, essentially, 5-step process is essentially what Chris kind of was trying to break down there. It starts in a House committee, then it goes to the House floor, then it goes, if it, makes all these steps right, Senate committee, Senate floor, and then the governor's desk. So essentially a 5-step process for changes to be made. Changes can be made at any of those steps. And then, as Chris was saying too, there's all sorts of kind of abilities along the way for checks and balances to be in place so that everybody is agreeing before, the governor is either approving or disapproving. And Governor Nome, as in now, she has the ability to either, veto the bill, which would say, hey, I know everybody pretty much said this was a good idea, but I still think it's a bad idea. And then there's, other processes for the legislature to, maybe check her power as well, and even possibly override her vote in the process. So there's I appreciate there is a similar, I appreciate the ability for all the checks and balances along the way. And I think it allows for a lot of transparency for citizens and the process in general, because all of these debates and questions and everything is broadcasted and recorded, and you can listen online. You can, these are all open to the public meetings for the public to sit in person as well, and have the ability to participate in the process. So it's a pretty cool thing, I think, when you really think about it.
And just because we're kind of talking about how the process works, and kind of so people can fully understand some of the terms that you'll hear used a lot in South Dakota, like crossover day is one we hear quite a bit. Crossover day is the day in which all House bills, so all legislators in the House who have put forth their bills, those bills have to be passed out of the House and sent to the Senate, and vice versa. All Senate bills then have to be passed out and passed over to the House to be contemplated. It happens faster than that, but you hear some stories in South Dakota about when maybe it wasn't as efficient as it been the last my 2 years, where crossover day gets to be a really long day of getting all of these bills passed or killed, and then so they can get over to the Senate. And then Sydney mentioned veto day. Veto day is a day of which about 3 weeks after the session's over, all the legislators go back. This last year, the governor did not veto a single bill. And we were talking earlier where it was, hopefully we were wondering if we were going to have a quorum because there was no business other than to adjourn the session. But 3 weeks after veto day, and it takes 2/3 of the vote of both chambers in order to override the governor's veto. So it's like what Sydney said, if the governor decided this bill, which passed both houses, was not a good idea, and then both houses were still strong in their belief that it was a good idea, if 2/3 of both houses vote, they can override that veto.
Okay. Can the governor also introduce a bill, or it has to go yeah?
I mean, technically, this gets a little bit in the weeds, but technically, no. And that talks a little bit. That speaks to a little bit about our branches of government. 3 branches in the South Dakota: the legislative branch, which is us. We're elected by the people to represent them and their districts.
Mm-hmm.
The executive branch, which is the governor, and then the judicial branch, right? Our judges, our court system, all of that stuff. So 3 separate branches of government. The governor certainly is fully entitled to having ideas and policy suggestions, but at the end of the day, you still need a legislator or a legislative committee to introduce a bill into the legislature. So there's a lot. Governor Noem has endorsed past policies, or taken credit for certain ideas that are moving through the legislature. And that's not entirely inaccurate either, but to move through the legislative process, you have to have either a senator or a representative introduce your idea for you.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's say, like me as a citizen, let's say I wanted to, like the example we tried, let's say I wanted to ban sunglasses. How does that process get up there? Do I introduce it, or do you introduce it? Like, let's say we wanted to do that.
Yeah. So that's a really good question, and a really good point. I mean, maybe not the example of the sunglasses, but some of our very best legislation actually starts from our constituents who come to us and say, hey, I've noticed this, or I've seen this, or this happened to me. Is there something that we can do about it? We live, we're citizen legislators. We live in our own world with our families and our work and the things that we do. So we aren't all knowing, right? So, but you have a different experience. You have different life experiences. Sydney has different life experiences. So maybe something that's happened in your life has said, hey, why do we do this way? So what should you do? You should contact one of your legislators and say, hey, this happened to me, or I was thinking about this, and is this possible? So what I think has been very good about South Dakota, and particularly in the legislators in District 17, is we're very, very apt to give out our cell phone numbers. I mean, I give it out all the time, 605-670-9698. You can call me and anytime you want, or text me, send an idea, because ultimately that is where the best legislation starts. Because like I said, your life experience might lead you to a great idea of something that I would never have come across. Mm-hmm. So that makes it. So it's basically you can't introduce a bill as yourself, but you can talk to me or Senator Davis or one of the other representatives and talk about the idea, figure out a way that it, maybe your idea needs to be tweaked a little bit in order to make legislation and the different language, and then a bill can be introduced. Not saying it can happen, not saying it's always going to happen that every idea that some constituent comes up with is then going to be introduced as law, but it does start conversations. In fact, I had one this morning with a constituent right here in District 17 about uninsured motorist insurance and what that and how we do it in South Dakota versus how other states do it, and are we doing it right? And so that just a conversation I had this morning, and so now I'm going to take that and do some research. We have the Legislative Research Council, which is basically the body that's hired to help legislators draft language, do research, do that kind of stuff. Because we don't have a staff, unlike when you're talking about like the federal government and federal representatives who have staffers and they hired people. You're looking at my staff. When you had Katie on, like that's one of my staff. When you came to Collins's party on Saturday, or Cure for Collins party, that's one of my staff, and Kellen, that's my other staff. So I have 3 staff members, my wife and my 2 kids. So we don't have staff. The LRC is our staff, and that will help us kind of get it in a way that if we do want to move forward with your idea, then we make it where it is where we can push that forward.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. Yeah, I was just gonna. Yeah, the only thing I would have added, but you covered it. Yeah, the Legislative Research Council is a relatively small office. I don't even want to try to number how many people work in that office. It can't be more than 20.
Yeah.
20 staffers for all 105 legislators. So, yeah, we if you send me an email, I'm the one replying. You're getting a reply from me, and I'm going to apologize in advance. Like, if you don't get a reply from me, it's not because I didn't read it. It's just my secretary is understaffed and underpaid, and that's me. So, it's just it's a lot. It's hard when we don't have a ton of resources. So it's definitely a balancing act to try to do our best to communicate with our friends and neighbors that we represent here, and we appreciate any grace that you give us along the way for either a slow reply or lack of reply. Please don't let that just remember that we are humans and that we don't have secretaries to do all that stuff for us. But please continue to reach out to us. We love hearing from you guys. And Chris hit the nail on the head. A lot of the legislation that I do bring forward is inspired by the people that we serve. Constituents coming forward with ideas, and I just firmly believe that's what we're supposed to do. I'm not supposed to go up there with my own personal agenda. I'm supposed to, work for the people that are sending me there. And so if you got ideas or you have questions about things, it's my job to help connect you with those resources. And I enjoy that part. I love talking to people.
And I'd also add too, like, sometimes, I mean, I'm in favor of less laws than more laws. So maybe it isn't a law. Maybe it's talking to a person. Maybe it's agency rulemaking. There's other things where if you have an idea or you have a concern, there's other means of which we can deal with that rather than have to introduce a bill, which again then creates more laws.
Can you also reverse a bill, or can you cancel it? Like if let's say this year or whatever year comes up, same thing with the sunglasses. It's been banned, but then people don't like it. They're like, hey, can you guys like reverse that? Can that happen too? Or do you have to introduce a new bill to that?
Yeah, you can. Any change can be made. We would repeal it. It would be what the bill text would look like. It'd have a big like line through the language that we want to delete, and that's what you would vote on.
And I would say, like, we hear a large number of bills each year are passed, and then it kind of makes, are we passing a lot more laws? A lot of this is modernization of the language, like what you're talking about. Maybe something that was passed in 1980 is obsolete now in 2024, right? And so there needs to be modernization and updating of that law in order to get it to current time. And so sometimes some of these bills are just very much cleanup language or modernization or getting them up to speed to what's happening in 2024.
Oh, okay. I get it now. Now, is it difficult because you guys represent District 17, and in South Dakota, well, each district, each place, each region is different from, different places. So if I said, hey, I wanted this, I wanted you guys to help, introduce a bill for, I think it will help us out. But what if it doesn't help out like somewhere up north or in the east or west? How do we get that going? Or is that when like you guys gotta explain it better? You guys feel me?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, and that's one of the things that we do encounter is something that might impact our region, our area, our district, might not impact, like you said, might not impact Rapid City or vice versa. At the end of the day, we represent District 17, but we're also state representatives, so we represent the state as a whole too. So there's a balancing act of what's good for District 17 and what's also good for the state. And although, I'm on appropriations, and, we appropriate money for different projects in different parts of the state, which as a state benefit our area, but individually those dollars aren't coming here. But overall they have a positive impact, and therefore that's why we push them forward.
What I gather maybe a little bit of your question is kind of asking is, how do you reconcile those differences, right? With maybe a fellow senator out in Rapid City says, "Hey, Senator Davis, I don't like your idea because it might not, be the best for my community, or why should I vote for your thing? It doesn't impact my community at all." Relationships, to be honest with you, importance is so important. Helping, Representative Kassin, he made that comment about, we broadly want to support our state too, and so just having those relationships, education, just talking with individuals about why it's important to your area, why you think it'd be good for the state. And sometimes you can overcome a lot of opposition or just disagreements just by conversations and educating people on the facts and helping them understand. Maybe they don't really fully understand why behind we're doing this, or maybe they've got some misinformation, and clarifying some details brings them on board. And that could be a time-consuming process to make those connections and make sure people's questions are answered. But in the same breath too, that 5-step process we talked about, how a bill can become law, those are very formal opportunities for debate, answering questions, and things like that too. So we can air out a lot of details, get a lot of questions answered, and throughout that process, help bring support along for ideas too. Or maybe we lose support, rightfully so.
Okay, so that you guys are just normal people just representing us. So that's why there's also like that, because you guys aren't there like every day, because it's not like the federal government. So, but you guys are there like for a certain period, January, right? If I remember right.
It's 9 weeks, starting about the first week in January, due about the first week in March.
Okay, so that's when you guys talk about the bills, and then this. Now after that, you guys just got to wait till next year, right? That's how it is. Oh, okay. But everything is kind of fast, right? We're more smoother, I would say.
More. I'm not sure that I exactly understanding. Are you kind of asking like, what do we do when we're not in peer?
Or the process of getting a bill or a law?
Oh,
like yes. Everything, it's more smoother.
I think. Well, if you're talking about like our process versus other states, when we talk about other states having what's known as like a pocket veto, where leadership controls what is introduced. In South Dakota, every bill gets a hearing. So whether we bring up the sunglasses, whether you can or can't wear sunglasses, if somebody wants to introduce that as a bill, it's going to be heard. If you were in Iowa or some other state that where we don't have our system, they're probably not going to let that be heard, because it's kind of silly, or in other terms, there's controversial things that they just don't want heard, and so they'll just put it in their pocket. In South Dakota, you can't do that. So we're one of the first states. We're one of the first states to finish, if not the first state to finish with our session. And I think deadlines make you do things, right? You bump up the deadline, you get things done, and so I think our 9-week session. Smooth might not be the right word for it, but it does progress. It does continually move. There's bumps along the way, and it does, I think to earlier question, it does become intense, but we do get done. We do get through. Ultimately the only thing that we have to do by law is pass a budget. That's the only thing. That's the only law we have to pass. So beyond that, we don't really have to pass anything else, but it does move relatively quickly. But again, in that time frame, there is I think the proper amount of time to have, in our case, between the House and the Senate, 4 cracks at making sure that bill has being vetted, making sure the public has a chance to weigh in, making sure that all of the individuals who are the stakeholders have an ability to weigh in, and in that short time frame, we're able to do that.
Because I'm thinking back how to that question, we're like, what if, probably our needs is probably different than the other needs of somewhere else. But since this is District 17, you got, if I remember right, I checked the map. It goes to close to Sioux City, Dakota Dunes.
Yes.
Now, have you guys noticed any, like, the people's, I guess, needs or differences? Like, for example, here in Vermillion versus over there, or they, tend to be different?
I'll take a crack at that. I think each community is obviously unique and different in its own ways.
Yep.
Right. Here in Vermillion, very concentrated focus on the University of South Dakota and how that impacts our community and our state too. Right. As you move southeast, as you get closer, as you travel through Elk Point and Jefferson, those are smaller bedroom communities with a huge influence of agricultural business and farmers and things like that, right? And then when you get into the Dakota Dunes, North Sioux City area, an area that I think still has a lot of similarities to the Vermillion community, but very impacted by tri-state commerce, tri-state laws, and the differences between our neighboring states of Iowa and Nebraska can really be at the forefront, because it's just a matter of a half mile and you're in the other state, right? Where it's completely different laws, completely different process, all of that stuff, right? So sometimes what other states are doing can impact our state very easily, and I think those differences are felt more intensely the closer you get to the border. And even here in Vermillion, I don't think we're necessarily immune to that because Nebraska is just right over there. So
yeah, you're right. Okay.
Border, tri-state issues, tri-state border stuff is, I think hits home here a little more than it does maybe in Kimball, South Dakota. So, or Chamberlain, South Dakota. They're a little farther from the border, and they don't necessarily, just for example, like teacher salaries, teachers in Iowa and Nebraska make quite a bit more than we pay here in South Dakota. And we're working hard to try to, fix that a little bit, because it makes a huge difference to our communities, because our school districts are having a hard time keeping up and being competitive, right? And they feel those staffing needs a lot harder than my good friend who's a kindergarten teacher in Kimball, South Dakota. Well, she's not going to drive to Nebraska for an increase. It's too far away. So things like that.
I also think we have to keep in mind a little bit too that, it's not just us. There are other levels of government, right? There's county commissions, there's city councils, there's school boards who are all acting on behalf of their communities. So, what's addressed in Vermillion isn't necessarily what Senator Davis or myself or Representative Shorma think, but all of those different levels of government then weighing in on specific policies. And then it's kind of like, what is the real difference? Like, what level of the policy are they looking at? So they're very granular, and we're probably looking at it from a more broad approach than, let's say, a school board does. Their policy is completely different than what we're doing at the state level. So we have to remember that we're part and parcel in our communities to a larger group of individuals that are help moving it forward.
Okay. Do you guys got any examples of, maybe in the past few years, but any bills that you guys have introduced, or that you guys were like, hey, we got to do this one. This one's a very important one, or stuff like that?
Oh, you sure you don't want to go?
Go ahead.
I've tend to focus a lot on healthcare legislation, and a lot of that's for a variety of reasons. Again, a lot of my ideas are brought to me from friends and neighbors that have questions, concerns about certain ideas, or professional groups. Like last year, I had one for the Optometrist Association that wanted to update the laws that govern how they take care of patients in our state. And so they really wanted a fellow healthcare professional like myself to advocate for them, because because of my expertise in healthcare. I certainly don't know everything, but I've kind of been tagged as the healthcare lady, so or the healthcare senator. And I don't know, gosh, I've carried a lot of bills. Everything, I'd say a lot of them are healthcare related, and one of my fun ones is I do really think rural issues, agriculture issues are incredibly important. Like I mentioned, I live on a farm north of town with my family. Grew up farming and ranching outside of Mitchell, South Dakota. So even though I kind of get, my narrative as the nurse is a little bit louder, agriculture is still our number one economy in this state and is very important to, I think, just our broad sense of way of life. And so supporting initiatives for agriculture and things that support our farmers and ranchers. And, I had a bill last year to help with a grant program that improves our roads and bridges out in the countryside, right? So not necessarily in the city, but kind of, geared a little more towards the rural areas of our counties, the gravel roads, the small bridges, things like that. And hoping to still find some opportunities to support our ag community in those ways as well.
I think this does offer a little bit of a chance to talk about like the difference in the committees. Senator Davis serves on policy committees, the education, health and human services. Those policy committees, I was fortunate enough, I guess I could call it fortunate. Some people would say that it's a punishment, but I was chosen for the appropriations committee, which has a different charge than the committees that Senator Davis serves on. Our job is to set the budget and to make recommendations, and the bills that we hear have a lot to do with how we're spending money. And so we meet every day versus policy committees that meet twice a week. We meet every day from about 7 a.m. till 5 p.m. We meet all day long. And as we kind of talked about it earlier, when you're trying to, you call it shepherd a bill through, and all of those different times you have to be working your bill, trying to get people to buy in, you just don't have that time when you're on appropriations, because we are constantly having hearings with the different agencies to understand their needs and how we're going to spend taxpayer dollars. So we want to make sure that we're there and we're paying attention and we're astute and we're doing the best job we can. So generally appropriators don't carry a lot of bills because and if they do carry bills, it's generally appropriations bills because they're in that committee. And so like when I'm thinking about one that is a bill that I passed through was this last session was the interest that we have a large fund set aside, and we're not going to get into the politics of building a prison, but in some way there's going to be a new prison in South Dakota. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of money that this legislature the last couple of years has set aside to build this prison. Well, one of the things that came to me is, okay, so we're setting aside $600 million to build this prison. I think that's currently where we're at, something like that. Why is the interest that the state is earning on that? Because just like our investments we have, the state earns investment income. Why is that money then going off of the fund that we've taken money and put into and going somewhere else, right? Going to maybe build government or grow government somewhere else. Why doesn't the money that we're growing on this particular large sum of money, the interest, why doesn't it just stay in that fund? Mm-hmm. And so I ran a bill that said the interest earned on the incarceration construction fund must stay in the incarceration construction fund. I mean, it seemed pretty logical to me. I think it passed both houses. I think it was unanimous in the House. I think maybe one nay vote in the Senate. So again, wasn't super controversial, but then that was also an appropriations bill. So the people that I would talk to and would have to convince, if it ever got to be a controversial bill, were the people that I'm already working with in appropriations. So just highlights a little bit the difference between the committees and just the amount of time that the appropriators spend makes it very hard to take on a large bill load, because ultimately if you bring your bill forward and you bring something to me, you would like that bill to pass, right? You had your idea, we get all of that point. You don't want me to drop the ball. I mean, it might fail because, we just don't get the support, but what you don't want is because I don't have the time as a legislator to work that bill with my fellow legislators, because I'm listening to a budget hearing and understanding how best to use our tax dollars. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And then now I'm starting to understand what you guys do, and you guys do like a lot. Because before I would have think, oh, politicians, they probably just sit down. I don't know if they're on their phone, but no, you guys do a lot of stuff. And which brings me also like, is there some stuff that you want people to know about the job? Like because now I'm understanding that you guys, because first of all, you guys have full-time jobs, you guys have a family, but you guys are also, part of the state government, and that one's not like a full-time job besides the sessions. So is there stuff that you want to tell people so they understand how it is? Because you guys, it seems like you guys do a lot now, a lot of stuff I didn't know.
I think just the bigger, it's hard to know what people know, right? And so I guess one of the biggest things that I just, hope folks take away from either listening to this or come to understand is that, yeah, we, like I think you said earlier, we're just normal people and just trying to do our best. We relatively have limited resources, right? I often dream about the day if I hadn't had a secretary, all the different things I could do. But, the reality is we don't. And so sometimes I wish, I could be a little more efficient with some of my emails or this or that. But, we do the best we can with the resources that we have and the time that we have to. And striking that balance is always challenging and difficult. But at the end of the day, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I like to say that or think that the majority of us are in this because it truly is public service. Nobody's getting rich off this. We take, it's a huge sacrifice to be away from your family, to be away from your job and your coworkers that, are frankly, they're picking up the slack for me while I'm gone, right? They're, maybe working short staffed or, there's a disruption in the routine. And so not only is your family kind of feeling the sacrifice of you being away, it's your friends back home, it's your coworkers, it's, things like that. But I do firmly believe, and I think that's why my family's supportive too. They recognize like public service is important. We all have a gift to give. That looks different for everybody. Whether it's running for office as a city council person, a county commissioner, a state legislator, or you're volunteering for the PTO or your local church or whatever it might be, like we all have a gift to give. And if you can give back, I just believe you should. And so this was an area that I guess I felt called to give back in. And so here I am, and I'm just thankful that the voters keep sending me back. So.
I think that's very well said. And I would just say, what I would, like people to know is it is incredibly rewarding to represent District 17, to represent a place that we all care about. You living here in Sydney, living here for quite a while, to represent an area that I love so much, to represent this particular place means a lot to me. It's not lost on me that, the voters continue to show up and they're the ones who decide that they want us to represent them in Pierre. And so very, very appreciative of that. I would just add, part of this, part of it, public service and being involved, you can, PTO, those kinds of things, but also you can look at every bill that's put forth on on the legislative page. You can listen to every hearing, if there's issues you're interested in. I would just encourage people to reach out to not just our legislators, but their elected officials and ask questions when they have questions. Because, it's a lot of times what you hear, somebody said to somebody, it's the game of telephone, right? You start with one person and by the time it gets to the eighth person, it's something that's completely maybe different, or it's just maybe not the factual or what was intended or what the actual bill said. So I would just go straight to the source. I mean, we were very accessible. I know several of our city council members. I know several of our school board members. Our elected officials are very, very, very responsive. So reach out when you have questions, and rather than continue to kind of the chain of telephone, reach out to the source and see where we're at, and then offer your input. And because like Senator Davis says, we really do read every email. We listen to you. We certainly want to take your phone calls and understand where your stances are, because not only does it help us form the legislation or things that can be done, but also helps in understanding what this district feels is the right path moving forward with regards to potential legislation.
Okay. No, I do agree. That part I do agree. Do you guys, because we're running out of time, do you guys have any last words, any shout outs or anything you guys want to give?
Early voting starts today, September 20th. Election day is November 5th. And just really encourage people, if you're not registered to vote, please register to vote. No complaining if you don't vote. So,
yeah, no, I would just add that this year there are several, in addition to our races that you'll be voting on. They're all severed ballot measures. There are several. I would just ask voters to be informed when you go vote. Your ballot is going to be pretty hefty. And there's different resources that you can go to look at those different ballot measures. The Secretary of State website has a kind of a description of what the ballot measure does. And then there's a pros and cons section where somebody who is for it writes about it, somebody who's against it writes about it. So you can see that contrast of why they think it's a good idea or why they don't think it's a good idea. So those are going to really impact significantly our state, those ballot measures. So I would just encourage voters to, understand who the candidates are, but also be reading up. I know there was a PBS debate last night that's live, or that you can watch online. I think there's 7 or 8 ballot measures, that you had a pro and a con debating that. So it's another resource for them to go, for the voters to go and watch. So just encourage folks to be educated when they go in to vote.
Okay. No, yeah, I agree. Early voting starts now, and it's gonna be an interesting year, very interesting year. But I do want to thank you guys so much for being on. But thanks for everything.